It started out like any normal Saturday morning, sunny skies, a quiet neighborhood, and my wife just heading out for a walk around the community. She's lived here for years, follows every HOA rule, and honestly keeps to herself. But what happened next took things to a whole new level of crazy. Out of nowhere, the HOA security guard, someone we've seen around but never had a problem with, approached her, started yelling about a supposed violation, and before she could even say a word, he grabbed her. It escalated so fast. He got physical, pulling her by the hair, right there on the sidewalk, in broad daylight. What he didn't know: my wife's not just anybody, she's a federal investigator with the Department of Justice, and she doesn't play when it comes to abuse of power. Now, before you think this is just another HOA horror story, trust me, it gets worse. The guard thought he was dealing with someone he could intimidate, but the second she identified herself, everything changed. You could see the color drain from his face. Neighbors came out, phones were recording. The HOA tried to step in and clean up the mess, but it was already too late. Stick around, because what happened after that, let's just say the entire neighborhood won't be forgetting it anytime soon. So here's some context, because this wasn't just some random outburst. We've had issues with this HOA for a while now. Petty fines, weird warnings about unauthorized plants, even getting cited for leaving our trash bin out a few minutes late. It always felt like someone had it out for us, but we kept things cool. My wife always said, let them dig their own hole. She's calm, sharp, and definitely not someone you mess with. But this time, it got personal. The security guy, new, maybe 2 or 3 weeks on the job. We hadn't interacted with him before, but from what a few neighbors said later, he'd been acting like he ran the place, barking orders, threatening people over minor stuff. Nobody thought he'd cross a line like this, though. Nobody. My wife was just walking, wearing earbuds, completely minding her own business. When he confronted her, she tried to de-escalate, told him she wasn't doing anything wrong. But he wasn't hearing it. He kept saying she was trespassing on community property, on a sidewalk we all use every day. That's when things spiraled. We still don't know if he was told to target her, or if he was just trying to flex his authority on the wrong person. Either way, what happened next sent shockwaves through the entire HOA board. After the incident, things didn't calm down. They got weirder. Within hours, the HOA sent out a community-wide email calling the situation a misunderstanding and asking residents not to speculate or spread misinformation. But by then, half the neighborhood had already seen the footage. Someone had filmed the whole thing from their porch, and while no one posted it publicly, yet, it was making the rounds in group chats. The HOA's attempt to sweep it under the rug only made people talk more. What really stirred the pot was when my wife started getting quiet messages from other residents. A single mom said the same guard had followed her teenage son home for looking suspicious. Another family said they'd been warned for loitering in front of their own garage. It wasn't just us. This guy had been power-tripping since day one, and now people were finally connecting the dots. Meanwhile, I started digging through HOA meeting notes and found something odd. This security company was hired just a month ago, and the contract didn't go through the usual vote. It was signed off by only 2 board members, both of whom suddenly stopped responding to emails. My wife, being who she is, wasn't going to let it slide, but instead of going straight to the DOJ or making a public complaint, she started building a case. Quietly, carefully, because something about this whole thing felt bigger than one guard getting out of line. As days passed, my wife kept digging, connecting the dots without making any noise. She wasn't just looking at this one security guard anymore. She started examining that HOA's dealings, its financials, and the way certain decisions were being pushed through. There were red flags everywhere, and it wasn't just about petty fines or random security guards abusing their power. Something was seriously off. One evening, she came home later than usual. I could tell something was up by the look on her face, tense but focused. She had just been at a board meeting, and it hadn't gone as expected. Two board members who had been in charge of the security contract were acting weird, like they were trying to avoid questions. But the real shocker came when she found out that one of them had just signed a deal with the same security company at a much higher rate than they had initially agreed to. It looked like a shady side deal, but nothing solid yet, just more questions piling on top of each other. That's when she decided to go to the next HOA meeting without telling anyone. She showed up early, blending in with the usual crowd of retirees and families, and took a seat in the back. As the meeting started, she noticed that the board members were acting increasingly defensive. They kept sidestepping questions, especially when it came to the security company. And that's when she realized something that sent a chill down her spine. The guard wasn't acting alone. This was all connected. The tension in the room was thick. People were starting to murmur about the security guard incident, and you could feel the mood shift as everyone sensed something was wrong. My wife's heart raced as she sat there, wondering how far these people were willing to go to cover up whatever was really happening. She knew she had to act, but she also knew that if she did, everything would change, and not in a way they'd be prepared for. Just as the board meeting continued, something unexpected happened. A man who had been sitting near the front stood up. He was someone we'd never seen before, a stranger to the neighborhood. His voice was calm, but there was a coldness to it as he addressed the board. "I think it's time we talk about the real reason you've been hiding all of this." The room went silent. The board members shifted uncomfortably, and people in the crowd began to exchange confused looks. My wife, though, immediately recognized him. This wasn't just a random attendee. This was the owner of the security company, the one she had been tracking down. The one whose shady dealings were starting to unravel. But this wasn't just about the security guard anymore. This man, the one standing in front of the board, was no longer just a businessman. He had ties to something far more serious. My wife had uncovered connections to a series of other communities, all with strange contracts, inflated charges, and a disturbing pattern of intimidation tactics. And now it seemed like he was trying to get ahead of everything. He wasn't there to smooth things over. He was there to send a message. "I know what you've been digging into," the man said, looking straight at my wife. "And I suggest you stop before you regret it." The board members suddenly looked more nervous, their faces drained of color. It hit my wife like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about protecting a shady security contract. It was about protecting something bigger. And now, the stakes were higher than she ever imagined. The tension in the room was unbearable. My wife's hand instinctively reached for her phone under the table, ready to record. But before she could do anything, the man turned to the board members and gave them a sharp nod. The board members looked as if they were being forced into something they didn't want to do, like pawns in a game they'd lost control of. Then the man locked eyes with my wife again. "You really don't know who you're dealing with, do you?" he said, his voice colder now. At that moment, everything seemed to fall into place. It wasn't just about the security company or the HOA's shady dealings. It was about corruption running far deeper than any of us had imagined. This man was connected to powerful people with far-reaching influence. The board members, they were scared of him. And the reason the security guard had gotten so physical with my wife was because he was under orders. Orders from someone with a lot to lose if the truth came out. But before anyone could make a move, my wife stood up. She didn't flinch. She walked right up to the man, facing him down. "You're wrong," she said calmly. "I do know exactly who I'm dealing with." She pulled out the stack of evidence she'd gathered, the hidden contracts, the inflated charges, the questionable board votes, and held it up for everyone to see. The room went quiet. The board members shifted uncomfortably, and for the first time, the man's facade cracked. Just as everyone thought the worst was over, a security guard entered the room, but this time it wasn't the one who'd dragged my wife. It was a different one, and he was holding something in his hand, a file. As he handed it to the board members, my wife's heart dropped. Inside the file was an anonymous tip that someone had sent to the board, exposing the security company's illegal activities. Someone had already been onto them, but the real twist. The tip had been sent from a hidden email account, and the name on it was my wife's. It wasn't just the HOA or the security company that had been compromised. Someone within the DOJ had been feeding them information all along, and as the board members realized they were caught in a tangled web of lies, betrayal, and corruption, they knew the truth would soon come to light. But the final question lingered: who had betrayed my wife? The man smirked. "You should have stayed quiet," he said, before walking out of the room. The game was far from over. As the board members scrambled to cover their tracks, my wife stood tall, feeling the weight of the moment. The hidden email tipped everything in her favor, and the FBI was already on their way to investigate the connections between the HOA, the security company, and the corrupt officials. It wasn't just about her now. It was about taking down a much larger network of deceit that had been affecting countless communities. The board members, realizing their time was up, quickly became cooperative, agreeing to hand over all the documents and contracts. In the weeks that followed, the entire HOA was dismantled. The security company was exposed for its illegal practices, and several board members were arrested for bribery, fraud, and conspiracy. The guard who had attacked my wife, he was fired and placed under investigation. But the real victory wasn't just in the arrests, it was in the lesson learned. People are watching, and sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that make the biggest impact. My wife had done what she does best. She stayed calm, she stayed sharp, and in the end, she brought the truth to light. And as for the man who had tried to intimidate us all, he vanished into the shadows, but we knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to get away with it forever.